Winter in upstate New York could be brutal, but nothing prepared us for that night. It started as an ordinary Friday. Me, Ryan, and Jake grabbing drinks at our favorite dive bar after work. The place was nearly empty, just a few regulars hunched over their drinks, and the TV muttering sports, highlights no one was watching. Outside, snow had already begun to fall, a soft dusting that seemed harmless enough. We had a couple of rounds, shot the shit about work, about Jake's awful boss, about Ryan's latest Tinder disaster. None of us knew this was the last normal conversation we'd ever have. By the time we left, the snow had turned into a full-blown blizzard, and something was out there. We had parked a few blocks away, figuring we'd sober up a little with the cold walk back. But as soon as we stepped outside, the wind hit like a knife, and visibility dropped to nearly nothing. "What the fuck?" Ryan muttered, pulling his jacket tighter. The streetlights flickered in the wind, barely cutting through the swirling snow. The roads were completely empty. No cars, no plows, no people. It was like the entire town had vanished. "We should have checked the weather," Jake grumbled. I pulled out my phone. No service. Ryan cursed. "All right, let's move fast before we freeze to death." We trudged forward, heads down, boots crunching in the thickening snow. But something felt wrong. The silence was too deep, the way sound vanished into the storm. Even our voices felt muffled, like we were speaking into a void. And then we saw the footprints. They weren't ours. A single trail of massive, deep footprints stretched ahead of us, half filled with fresh snow. They looked human, but too big, too long, and they led straight down the road in the direction of our cars. Jake stopped first. "What the hell made those?" We all stared. The wind howled, but the snow didn't erase the prints fast enough. Something had been here recently, and it was heading in the same direction we were. I felt a pit form in my stomach. "Let's just get to the car," Ryan said, his voice lower now. We kept walking. The footprints didn't stop. They went all the way to the lot where we had parked, and then we saw it. My car was there. Ryan's truck too, but Jake's SUV, gone. "Dude, where the fuck is my car?" Jake shouted, his breath steaming in the cold. Panic surged through me. There were no tire tracks leading away. No signs of movement. Just those deep, awful footprints, leading right up to where the SUV had been parked, and then stopping. Like something had just picked it up and walked off with it. We stood there, stunned. Ryan was the first to move. "We need to go. Now!" Jake shook his head violently. No, this doesn't make sense. Cars don't just..." Then the noise came. A deep, guttural howl, rolling through the snow, vibrating in our bones. It didn't sound like a wolf, or a bear, or anything natural. It sounded wrong. A mix of grinding metal and something alive. The wind carried it from somewhere close. Too close. We ran. Ryan fumbled with his keys, swearing, his breath ragged. I yanked open my car door, shoving Jake toward the passenger seat as Ryan dove into his truck. Then, a shadow moved. Through the snow, just at the edge of the lot, something shifted. A tall, impossibly tall figure, barely visible in the blizzard. It stood just beyond the glow of the streetlights, its limbs too long, its head too narrow, and its eyes, black, sunken, watching us. I slammed the door shut and locked it. Drive! Drive! Ryan's truck roared to life, its tires spinning before catching traction. I barely got my own car started, my hands shaking violently as I threw it into reverse. The shadow didn't move. It just watched. Then, as my headlights swung toward it, I saw its mouth. It wasn't a mouth. Not really. Just a gaping hole, stretching from where its jaw should have been, down its neck, splitting open like a wound. And inside, teeth. Rows and rows of teeth. It took a single step forward, and the streetlight shattered. I floored the gas. We tore out of there, tires skidding, engines roaring against the wind. My hands were locked onto the wheel, my pulse a deafening drumbeat in my ears. Jake was hyperventilating beside me, staring out the window. And then, his breath hitched. I knew before I even looked. It was running beside us, not chasing, not falling behind, keeping pace. Its legs moved in that same unnatural jerking motion, too long, too fast. And the whisper started. Not from outside, from inside the car. I gripped the wheel harder. We're almost to the highway. Just hold on. Ryan's truck was still ahead of us, his brake lights barely visible through the snow. Jake finally screamed. I didn't want to look, but I did. And the thing that wasn't human, that wasn't an animal, was grinning at us. Teeth too sharp, eyes too hollow, head tilting in something almost amused. Jake punched the dashboard. Fucking go! The moment we hit the highway, the presence vanished. 1 second, it was there. The next, gone. No more footprints in the snow. No more whispers. Just empty road and the storm raging around us. Ryan's truck pulled over a few miles ahead, and we did the same. We sat there, breathing hard, hands shaking. Jake was the first to speak. What the fuck was that? None of us had an answer. We never went back. The next morning, Jake's SUV was found, abandoned in the middle of a frozen lake. No tracks leading to it, no explanation. I should have just waited out the storm. It was a mistake, stopping at that motel. I was driving home from a work conference in Cleveland, planning to meet my family in upstate New York for the holidays. I left later than I wanted, and by the time I was halfway there, the weather had turned brutal. Snow came down in thick waves, the wind howling, ice forming on the windshield wipers. Somewhere along Route 46, visibility dropped to nearly nothing. The road was deserted, my tires barely gripping the pavement. I knew I couldn't make it much further without risking my life. That's when I saw the sign. Valley View Motel, vacancy. It looked old, the neon flickering, half the letters burned out. I had no other option. I wish I had kept driving. The motel sat off the road, barely visible through the snowfall. The parking lot was empty except for an old pickup truck coated in frost. The office lights were on, though, and I figured at least someone was there. Inside, the air smelled like stale cigarettes and dust. A bell sat on the front desk, next to a stack of yellowed newspapers. I rang it. A few seconds later, a man shuffled out from the back. He was older, maybe late 60s, with thin white hair and a lined face. He gave me a tired smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Bad night to be out. His voice was gravelly. Yeah, I said, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. Just need a place to crash for a few hours. He nodded and grabbed a key from the wall. Room 8. Cash only. I hesitated. Who the hell didn't take cards in 2023? But I was exhausted, and I had cash on me, so I handed over a few bills. End of the lot, he said, handing me the key. Heat's spotty. Try not to leave the room at night. That last part made me pause. What? He didn't answer, just smiled and shuffled back into the office. I parked in front of room 8, the last unit before the woods. The wind rattled the windows, and the snow was already piling against the door. Inside, the room was freezing. The heater barely worked, and the furniture looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. Faded carpet, a stiff bed, an old tube TV with a static covered screen. I double-checked the lock. Then I noticed something weird. There was a mirror on the far wall, positioned directly across from the bed. Not on the bathroom door, not on the dresser. Just there, facing the bed. And when I looked into it, I could have sworn. The reflection lagged. Like, for a second, I didn't move at the same time as my reflection. I shook it off. I was just tired. I got into bed, still in my jeans and sweater, and pulled the covers over me. The wind howled outside. The room was silent except for the dull hum of the heater struggling to stay alive. And then, I heard it. A faint scratching sound. My breath caught. I sat up, straining to listen. It wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the room, from the mirror. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The scratching was soft, like nails dragging against glass. I slowly turned toward the mirror. Nothing. But as I stared at my reflection, I realized my reflection wasn't sitting up. It was still lying down, eyes open, staring at me. I scrambled out of bed, heart hammering, grabbing my keys. I was done. I didn't care if the storm was bad. I'd rather die in a ditch than stay in that room. But when I reached the door, it wouldn't open. The lock turned, the handle moved, but the door wouldn't budge, like something was holding it shut. Then, from behind me, a whisper, a woman's voice. "Lay back down." I spun around. The room was empty, but the mirror was different now. My reflection was standing up, smiling. Not a normal smile. Too wide. Too many teeth. I backed away, pressing myself against the door, my hands shaking. My reflection did not. It stepped forward. And the worst part? I heard footsteps in the room. But there was nothing there. Just the mirror. And my smiling reflection, taking another step closer. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and threw it as hard as I could at the mirror. Glass shattered, raining down in glittering shards. The room seemed to shudder, like the air itself had been pulled tight. And then, silence. The door suddenly flew open, the wind howling in from outside. I didn't think. I ran. I bolted to my car, nearly slipping on the ice, and slammed the door shut behind me. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get the keys in the ignition. As I sped out of the lot, I glanced back once. The motel was dark. The office, my room, all of it. Like it had never been open. I drove straight to a gas station about 20 miles down the highway, still shaking. The clerk gave me a weird look as I walked in, my face pale, my hands cut from the broken glass. I asked if he knew about Valley View Motel. He frowned. That place burned down. Years ago. My stomach dropped. What? Yeah, in the 90s. Some guy went nuts, killed a woman in one of the rooms, then lit the place on fire. No one ever rebuilt it. I didn't say anything. I just walked back to my car in silence. I made it to my parents' house the next morning, barely able to process what had happened. But the worst part? I still dream about that mirror, and sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I hear scratching, coming from the closet. I've always loved road trips. Something about the open road, the music blasting, and the freedom of being away from home felt thrilling. But after what happened last winter, I don't think I'll ever take one again. It was December, a week before Christmas. My friend Josh and I were driving up to his family's cabin in Vermont. We had planned it for weeks. 3 days of snowboarding, drinking by the fire, and just unwinding before the holidays. The forecast called for snow, but nothing serious. That was a lie. The storm hit fast and hard. One moment, we were cruising down the highway, laughing at some dumb joke Josh made. The next, the sky turned into a swirling white abyss, snow hammering the windshield. Visibility dropped to nearly zero. "We need to find a place to pull over," I said, gripping the wheel. Josh pulled up a map on his phone. "There's a side road up ahead, leads to a motel or something." We had no choice. The highway was getting dangerous, and the last thing I wanted was to spin out on black ice. I took the turn. That was my first mistake. The road was narrow, the trees towering on both sides, their branches heavy with snow. It felt wrong, like we had just driven into another world, one where the rest of civilization didn't exist. We drove for miles. No street signs, no other cars, just an endless stretch of road, disappearing into the whiteout. Then we saw the car. It was an old sedan, half buried in the snow, hazards blinking weakly. It was pulled off to the side, its driver's side door wide open. Josh frowned. "Dude, should we stop?" Something about it made my skin crawl. It looked recent, like whoever had been driving had just gotten out. And then, as we passed it, I saw them. Footprints, leading away from the car, into the woods. I don't know why, but I kept driving. Something in my gut told me to get away from that car. Josh was still looking at his phone. This road should lead somewhere. It has to. But it didn't. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The road never ended. My hands tightened on the wheel. "Check the GPS." Josh tapped the screen. Then again. His face paled. No service. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest. We weren't on the map anymore. Josh laughed nervously. "We must have taken a wrong turn." I didn't answer, because up ahead, through the thick snowfall, was the same car. The old sedan. Door still open. Hazard still blinking. Footprints still leading into the woods. Josh's breathing went shallow. "Number no fucking way." I sped up. Minutes later, my headlights cut through the storm, revealing the sedan, again. Same exact spot, same open door, same damn footprints. Josh was shaking. "We're going in circles, how?" I tried to stay calm, but my pulse was pounding in my ears. I slammed the brakes and turned to him. "Call someone, now!" He fumbled for his phone, hands shaking. No signal. I grabbed my own phone. No service. That's when we heard it. A knock. Not on my window. Josh's. He yelped and spun toward the sound. There was nothing there. Only the swirling snow. And then, the door handle moved. Like someone was trying to get in. Josh screamed. "Go! Go now!" I slammed on the gas. The car lurched forward, skidding on the icy road. My breath was ragged, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. We passed the sedan again, but this time, the door was closed. And there were no footprints, just drag marks leading into the trees. Neither of us spoke. I just kept driving. The road stretched on endlessly, the snowstorm swallowing everything around us. I don't know how long we drove before we saw the lights. Diamond signs flickering. A motel sign, barely visible through the storm. Josh nearly sobbed with relief. "Holy shit! We made it!" I pulled into the lot and killed the engine. The place looked old and run down, but at least it was shelter. We ran inside, the warmth of the lobby hitting us like a wave. An old man sat behind the desk, his expression unreadable. "We need a room," I panted. "Just for the night." The man didn't move. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Only one way in." Josh and I exchanged a look. "What?" The man's gaze didn't waver. "No way out." We didn't stay. We ran back to the car, peeling out of that parking lot as fast as the ice would allow. I don't know how, but eventually, we found the highway again. The storm had eased up, and just like that, it was over. We never found the road again. It didn't exist on any map. Josh refuses to talk about it. I don't blame him. Because sometimes, in my nightmares, I see it. That old sedan. Those footprints leading into the woods. And something watching us from the trees.